I think these elections for the Russian parliament were unusually surprising. I think before the election, a lot of people had figured that United Russia, the pro-Putin party, was going to go ahead and achieve its usual constitutional majority, meaning that they'll have enough votes, basically 2/3 of the seats in the parliament, to unilaterally amend the Constitution. People assumed that there was going to be widespread falsification, which would have made that, realized that. But in actuality, it wound up that United Russia got under 50% of the vote, at least according to the preliminary results that have come in. Interestingly, exit polls that were conducted by firms who were widely considered to be relatively close to the regime itself indicated that the party got even less, 48, 49% in one case, and in another case, around 46, 47%. So it was actually quite a surprise from a larger perspective that the party did not do nearly as well as people had expected. This is a party, obviously, that's backed strongly by Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister, and the party list was headed by current President Dmitry Medvedev. These unusual results of the election were actually a reflection, interestingly enough, of a significant change in public opinion in Russia, which I think reinforces the idea that while the political system is highly manipulated and it's rather, I mean, one would say actually extremely unfair in terms of the way that the competition is organized, nevertheless, public opinion still has a significant role in that system. And I think the results of this election show that the election results are not entirely fake. Certainly there's some degree of falsification that observers seem to have documented, and that would not be a surprise to Russia observers. But by the same token, there is a degree to which the election results reflect, to some degree, public opinion. Perhaps it's a public opinion that is the product of a lot of manipulation and closure of media. But what's interesting about this election was that you saw a dramatic shift in public opinion, which seems to have maybe been building for a while in terms of potential, but was really catalyzed by what I might call the switcheroo, which took place on September 24th when incumbent President Dmitry Medvedev announced that he was going to support Vladimir Putin for president in the next election, rather than running for election himself. And shortly after that, it was announced that this was something that had been planned all along. Medvedev himself seemed very uncomfortable when this announcement was made. And this whole affair seems to have just really turned off Russian voters. So you saw that decline between September and Election Day. And this was reflected in certain other dramatic events which took place, such as perhaps the most dramatic one was where Putin appeared at a mixed martial arts event, which is kind of his crowd, where he was expecting, he himself was a champion wrestler in Russia and kind of appeals to this sort of young male crowd. And he got up after the fight in which a Russian had defeated an American and started to say a few words, and he got booed, basically, and so, or whistled, which is the equivalent of the boo in sort of the Russian context. And that really shocked people, but I think really illustrated the degree to which he seems to have lost his Teflon coating. This incident was widely spread on the internet, was posted on YouTube. You can go on YouTube and find it if you look up Putin whistling or Putin booed. A lot of Russians did look at that, and it just reinforced the idea, helped communicate to other Russians that other people may have had some of the same feelings. And so I think this led to, in part, a bit of a weakening of the political machine, as well as the rise of a willingness of people to vote for parties other than Russia's United Russia party. Well, I should say, United Russia still won because it got enough, according to preliminary results in the exit polls, or at least one of the exit polls, that it should still have a bare majority of seats in the parliament, in the Duma. So in that sense, the leaders of United Russia were perfectly correct in claiming, at least according to official results, victory. The biggest opposition party is the Communist Party, which was trying to position itself not only as a leftist party, but also as a receptacle for protest votes. And so it got 8 or 9% more of the vote than it did in the last Duma election, so nearly doubling its result. True opposition party is the Yabloko Party, And that's a liberal democratic party that has been around since Russia's first parliamentary election led by the famous economist Grigory Yavlinsky. And it used to be in the parliament, then during Putin's era had lost its position, had sunk to a low of around 1% of the vote in the last Duma election. It claimed that it was the victim of a lot of fraud and other machinations, which may be true. And in this election, it got over 3% of the vote, which isn't much, but what is important about that is that that means the party is now eligible for state financing. I think this Duma election will have an important set of consequences for the presidential voting in March. And I think what this Duma vote does is signal the weakness of the regime. Again, it's still able to generate a majority of seats in the Duma based on the official vote count, so it's not terribly weak. It hasn't collapsed. I certainly wouldn't characterize this as a collapse. But it is signaling that there's a moment of weakness in the regime. It wasn't able to generate an overwhelming majority. You saw figures in the regime during the course of the fall, during the election campaign itself, scaling down their public expectations for what the result would be, going down from 65% or roughly 2/3 of the seats to just a bare majority. And so I think what this does is it starts to give at least some encouragement to other political figures that may have been on the fence about whether to jump into the presidential race and how seriously they should take the presidential race. So in a lot of ways, those are the same old characters. These parties don't seem to have made way for new, fresh faces to enter the race, which could shake things up, although it's actually unclear who those might be and whether really such fresh faces exist that could shake things up from those parties. I think the chances of Putin winning, of course, are still high, but I think this Duma election at least calls into question whether he'll win in the first round. If he doesn't win 50% of the votes in the first round, then there's a runoff. So at least there's a non-zero probability that I think the presidential race could get actually very, very interesting in an unexpected way.